A global collapse is imminent. From wars to the economy, disease outbreaks, or famine, be prepared. Build yourself with the proper mindset to endure the things to come. Seek the Most High in all that you do, because without Him, we are nothing. Let's get into some likely events and ways you can survive with this mindset.
Light of Africa.
Okay, according to scriptures, these things will happen. Let's look a little further into this. Let's go to Matthew 24, verses 6 to 8, and the Bible reads, "And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye not be troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nations shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in divers places. All these are the beginning of sorrows." Yeah, so we're definitely seeing wars, rumors of wars, plagues, earthquakes, diseases, and so much more.
It's highly important for us to acknowledge the fact that the scripture is telling us not to be troubled by these things. Let's look into some current events.
Now, speaking of Russia, Moscow has made a power move on the other side of the world. Yesterday, some Russian ships arrived in Cuba. Russian warships. There was one guided missile frigate, the Admiral Gorshkov. It's the lead ship of an entire class of frigates, armed with Caliber cruise missiles, Zircon hypersonic missiles, and Onyx anti-ship missiles. It arrived in the Havana port yesterday, flanked by a tugboat and a fuel ship. So a Russian frigate, armed to the teeth, docked in Cuba, a country that the US has embargoed since 1958. You heard that right, 1958, 66 years. It is the longest trade embargo in modern history. So it's safe to say that Cuba and the US aren't on good terms, and now a Russian ship has docked in Havana. It's a signal from Putin that Russia can waltz into America's backyard anytime it wants to. And the frigate wasn't even the real message. Putin's big warning cruised in a little later, half submerged, Cuban and Russian naval flags fluttering in the wind, and a contingent of soldiers on the deck. It was a Russian nuclear-powered submarine, the Kazan. Cuba greeted the vessel with a cannon salute. The residents of Havana had lined up to get a glimpse of the ships. His target is a little to the north, barely 160 kilometers away from Cuba. That is where Florida begins, which means that Putin has just sent his warships to America's doorstep. This comes weeks after an American provocation. The US recently gave Ukraine a green light. It allowed Kiev to use American weapons to strike Russian territory. Putin said that it was an escalation, and now he has responded by sending warships to Cuba. This has some Americans worried.
In the Taiwan Strait, top US Admiral of the Navy fleet in the Indo-Pacific has threatened to turn the Taiwan Strait into an unmanned hellscape in the event of China invading Taiwan. The United States maintains strategic ambiguity when it comes to the recognition of Taiwan. However, it has been a vocal supporter of Taiwan in recent times. Admiral Samuel Paparo, the commander of the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, said at the International Institute for Strategic Studies Shangri-La Dialogue Summit that, and I'm quoting here, "I want to turn the Taiwan Strait into an unmanned hellscape using a number of classified capabilities," adding that I can make their lives utterly miserable for a month, which buys me the time for the rest of everything. As per Admiral Paparo, the plan would involve deploying thousands of unmanned systems, including surface vessels, submarines, and aerial drones, to confront Chinese invading forces as they cross the Taiwan Strait.
The skies over northern Israel were filled with smoke again. Hezbollah is intensifying its attacks. This week, it launched a barrage of rockets towards Israel, targeting as many as 6 Israeli military sites. The latest round of attacks began on Tuesday when Israel neutralized a senior member of Hezbollah, Talib Abdullah, better known as Abu Talib. He was a high-ranking commander of Hezbollah, and his death has become a rallying cry in Beirut.
After this pure blood of our dear leader, after the martyrdom of Abu Talib, we will increase our operations in intensity, force, quantity, and quality. and let him wait for us in the field.
For 8 months, Israel and Hezbollah have been trading fire. But this week's escalation is worrying. In terms of scale, it's one of the biggest attacks yet. Over 215 rockets were launched. They ignited a string of fires in northern Israel. Hezbollah says it took out military targets, including Mount Meron, where the Israeli forces have a radar station and a factory which makes armored vehicles. The comments have sparked fresh fears for a wider war in the region.
Lebanon and Hezbollah, under the guidance of Iran, bear full responsibility to the deterioration of the security situation in the north.
Since the war began in Gaza, the Hezbollah has maintained pressure on Israel on the northern border. Just like the Hamas, Hezbollah too has the backing of Iran. But compared to the Hamas, Hezbollah is a more powerful force. It has participated in multiple regional conflicts. The group's fighters have extensive experience in urban warfare, and they're also well equipped. The Hezbollah has some 200,000 warheads, 140,000 mortar shells, and many drones and precision-guided munitions. So the Hezbollah can sustain a long war. The United Nations is worried about this scenario.
The situation, like I said, across both sides of the blue line, to calm down so that things don't spiral out of control.
Meanwhile, North Korea is rolling out the red carpet for Vladimir Putin. The streets of Pyongyang are lined with Russian flags and banners of the Russian president. He's expected to arrive in the next few hours for his first visit in many years. But the trip is raising concern with the US and its Western allies about North Korea's military support for Russia's war in Ukraine.
Germany wants to arm Ukraine with Russian funds. Interest earned from Russian assets frozen by the EU should be spent on weapons for Ukraine, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said. The US and its allies seized around $300 billion in assets belonging to the Russian Central Bank in February 2022 when the Ukraine conflict escalated. The EU has stopped short of confiscating the money outright, proposing instead to direct the interest to Kiev. It is important that we also agree that this money can be used for arms purchases, not only in the EU, but for purchases worldwide, Scholz told reporters in Riga after a meeting with the governments of Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. He endorsed a proposal by EU Foreign Policy Commissioner Josep Borrell about how the money should be allocated. According to Borrell, around 90% of the interest should be spent on weapons for Ukraine through the European Peace Facility program, while the rest would be allocated to EU budgets to support Kiev's own military industry.
Ukraine today. First, in the information war, Russia's defense ministry has announced it's carrying out tactical nuclear weapons drills as part of military exercises. The Kremlin describing the move as a response to Western threats over Ukraine. We've also heard from Moscow that, according to AFP news agency, that it could launch strikes at, quote, British military targets inside Ukraine and elsewhere if Kyiv's forces use British-supplied missiles, coming off the back of comments by Lord Cameron, the Foreign Secretary in the UK, who said that Kyiv absolutely had the right to strike back at Russia, including outside of Ukraine territory, in Russian territory.
It seems like we are getting ready for World War III. Or are we in World War III? These things are ordained to happen. So what we should be doing is to be prepared for these things. It's almost as if they're setting the stage for something, because since of late, it feels like we're living in a movie. The narratives are being set in place for what's to come. So if we're busy fighting against each other, then we're missing the point to the greater picture of what's really going on. Stay focused.
Okay, let's move into the next situation, and that's disease. So we clearly see in the last couple of years that we've experienced something that we've never experienced in our lifetime, and that's the global disaster. Let's discuss the impact it has had on all of us as a people and as a society. It really affected us socially, mentally, and emotionally. Most people can attest to the fact that they probably didn't expect a time where they wouldn't be allowed to travel at their own will. We've been told many times that we're not over, and there's a possibility that there'll definitely be another one, a greater one.
Disease X is a term for a hypothetical illness, one that has not happened and is currently unknown.
In the scenario, experts from around the globe are evaluating what would happen and what we would need to do in order to prepare for a virus that could claim up to 20 times more lives than the COVID-19 pandemic. In Davos, the Disease X scenario took center stage Wednesday.
You may even call COVID as the first Disease X. And it may happen again.
The WHO Director General acknowledges tough lessons were learned during COVID-19.
Anything happening is a matter of when, not if.
Bring you bad news. News of yet another murderous pandemic from China, a deadly and mysterious form of pneumonia.
Imagine your vision is totally normal, and then one day you see demonic features everywhere on people only, just like this, what you see behind me. Now that's a reality for a man named Victor Shera. He has extremely rare yet terrifying disorder called PMO, and it's commonly known as, or now known because people didn't know about it at first. It's called the demon face syndrome. People with the condition see parts of other people's faces distorted in shape, texture, position, or color. There are 75 known cases of the disorder.
We just issued an alert for doctors here in the U.S. warning them of a new virus outbreak. I know, right? Another one? Okay, well, the agency is asking physicians to be on the lookout for cases of Marburg virus. And you might be thinking, what is Marburg virus? Palacero joins us now to break down what exactly it is and what the infection looks like. Hey, Pala.
Yeah, Faith, I've got that answer for you. Marburg is in the same family as Ebola. Both diseases are viral, fatal, and can cause internal bleeding and damage to your organs. So let's show you a list of the symptoms people with Marburg can experience. These include headache, fatigue, and bleeding.
Scientists are warning about the potential resurgence of so-called zombie viruses, or viruses that can come back from the dead. They say warmer conditions are causing part of the Arctic's permafrost to thaw. If it thaws significantly, they say some viruses that have been lying dormant for tens of thousands of years could reemerge and possibly endanger animals and humans. Scientists say the permafrost acts like a time capsule for viruses and the mummified remains of long-gone animals.
Okay, so things are happening everywhere. Let's not focus too much on the diseases and the outbreaks that could happen. Let's remember and stay focused on the fact that if we believe and trust in the Most High Yah, we will be okay. We will be good. He has our back. He has our back in every single way, even in terms of our health. So we need to believe and lean on Him.
If we're not spiritually sound in these times, it's possible for fear to take over our minds. We have to remember that fear is not of the Most High. 2 Timothy chapter 1 verse 7 says, "For God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power, and of love, and of a sound mind."
Okay, so we can all see that we've been affected by the pandemic and the current wars. Cost of living has definitely gone up. From grocery prices to rental properties to mortgages, we're all facing it worldwide.
With that being said, let's check out how the economy is doing.
Some breaking news: Wall Street took a hit, with all three major indexes finishing the day in the red. The Dow fell more than 400 points after the Labor Department reported a higher than expected spike in inflation. The Consumer Price Index for March rose at an annual rate of 3.5%, and that is the biggest jump in 6 months.
Before the pandemic, all of these groceries, about 30 items, cost $100 on average. Now, 5 years later, according to Nielsen IQ, all this costs 33% more, meaning you'd have to skip about 10 items, like chicken, bread, milk, and bananas to make your $100 budget. Is that normal?
Oh goodness, it's not normal at all.
Higher gas prices and rent also helped push inflation up 3.5% over the last year. Also more expensive, baby food and formula spiking nearly 10%, elder care up over 14%, and veterinary care jumping almost 10%.
We asked Americans, have you changed your behavior? And 87% of Americans have said yes to that.
This March inflation number is the biggest annual jump in 6 months, and it really makes it very unlikely that the Federal Reserve will lower interest rates anytime soon.
The poorest states in America
the poorest state in America, is now doing better than the United Kingdom.
And inflation in Ethiopia has surged to 8.7% as the country continues to face some pretty significant macroeconomic challenges.
People's purchasing power has gone backwards. On top of that, banks have tightened up credit conditions, so credit isn't as available, and already consumers have a fairly high level of debt.
It was hoped the bank would start its rate-cutting cycle in the second quarter of this year. However, due to increased pressures, it expects inflation to reach the midpoint of 4.5% only in 2025. Food inflation is of particular concern.
Last year, food inflation hit the highest levels since 2008. Food inflation has now slowed, but this is a critical time in the growing season, and the weather has been unusually hot and dry, which may cause food inflation to pick up again.
The cost of living is too high, even if you have two jobs. To keep your head above water is really difficult.
Basic food items are becoming unaffordable, while those that are employed say they're spending most of their money on transport, electricity, and healthcare.
Our quality of life, the price of electricity and basic services has increased exponentially. I've got so many friends that are losing their homes, that are losing their cars.
It's been a tough few years for South Africans, having to deal with higher fuel and food costs. Inflation is also feeding into services, making essentials like healthcare more expensive.
You can see that Australia is almost grinding to a halt right now, and notwithstanding the fact that the economy is barely teetering above a recession right now, with the last quarter just 0.1% and this quarter probably negative, the reality is that you'd expect under normal circumstances the Reserve Bank would come to the rescue, start to cut interest rates and get some economic growth going. Well, it can't do that right now, and mainly because of this strange experiment that Australia's got to try and keep as many people in a job as they possibly can, and so therefore allowing inflation to remain above the target and also trying to keep interest rates higher for longer. That's an experiment. It hasn't worked anywhere else in the Western world before. Australia's on this experiment, and so at a time when Canada, Europe, maybe the UK in the near future cut interest rates, here in Australia we've got the prospect of rates rising and not falling.
We're seeing increasingly day by day, week by week, businesses falling over. I think a couple of largish businesses today fell over. That means people out of work. That means that the economy is not growing. Are you worried about the future of businesses being able to keep their doors open if the interest rates stay where they are?
Yeah, I'm worried about the bold experiment just not having worked, and that when you saw, say, our neighbours in New Zealand raise interest rates much more aggressively than Australia, put themselves into a recession, have unemployment higher than what it is here in Australia, but get to the end of the process much more quickly. Here, it's almost death by a thousand cuts in some ways, trying to maintain full employment, which is honourable and it's a good thing. But the fact of the matter is that there is no productivity growth in Australia. If all of the workers out there were highly productive and we had an economy that was actually pumping and booming along right now, you probably have inflation lower than what it is. You wouldn't even be talking about this argument. But the fact of the matter is that Australia's economy is not productive. We don't have a flexible labour force because of, guess what, many of the laws that have been brought in by the Labor government, which makes bargaining sort of on an industry-wide basis, which means that people can't easily get a job in the gig economy or part-time work or casual work without potentially having to become full-timers in the future. So this is where Australia is almost creating rules that actually work against the economy rather than working for the economy to make it flexible to get through these tight times.
Wow, well that's a lot, and unfortunately, it's only going to get worse. Let's not forget about the pestilences and the natural disasters.
Folks in Jamaica are on edge after a 5.4 magnitude earthquake
Rocks Kingston. The quake yesterday prompting people to run from buildings. Food and other items just tumbled right off the shelves of grocery stores. Take a look at the inside of this one. Bottles all over the floor. Now, officials say no deaths or severe damage has been reported, thankfully. But small earthquakes are pretty common around Jamaica, but large ones are rare. The devastating Port Royal earthquake happened back in 1692. A portion of the town there sank into the sea after that quake.
Schools and businesses closed early Monday after Jamaica was rocked by a 5.6 magnitude earthquake. No injuries have been reported so far. There were also mass evacuations with some grocery stores reporting items falling from shelves.
Tsunami warning after a powerful 7.5 magnitude earthquake struck in the west of the country, and there are reports of tsunami waves actually coming ashore. According to the US Geological Survey, at least 9 aftershocks have rattled the region, including one with a magnitude of 6.2.
Hi, Max. So as you mentioned, we saw a huge earthquake, a 7.5 magnitude earthquake hitting western Japan. A tsunami warning has been issued for the entire west coast of Japan, specifically in the city of Noto in Ishikawa Prefecture. They're under a major tsunami warning. They could see a tsunami waves of measuring up to 5 meters.
Powerful 7.8 magnitude earthquake rocked southern Turkey and neighboring Syria earlier. At least 43 aftershocks have occurred with a magnitude of 4.3 or more. A strong shock of magnitude 7.5 flight after a devastating earthquake. This aftershock was extremely shallow, only 10 kilometers deep, which was in the shaking belt.
Tonight, San Diego shell-shocked by sudden, unrelenting rainfall.
Highways and malls have been flooded. Schools have been closed and flights disrupted at one of the world's busiest airports.
Our next story is about Dubai. It's flooded. The desert kingdom receives sparse rainfall every year, but yesterday was quite different. It was the wettest day in Dubai's history. So much so that the city received a year's worth of rainfall in a single day. It paralyzed the whole of Dubai. Highways and malls were flooded, flight operations were suspended, schools were closed, and at least one person was killed. So what led to this torrential rainfall in Dubai of all places? Is it climate change or something else?
Luxurious skyscrapers, desert landscapes, and world-class infrastructure. Dubai is known for a lot, but if there's one thing it's not known for, it's rain.
Agency has issued its highest level rainstorm warning yet for the south of the country.
More than 100,000 people have been evacuated from their homes in Guangdong after days of heavy rain caused massive flooding in the country's most populous province.
Powerful storms across southern China turned rivers into raging torrents. Roads became fast-flowing rapids, cascading down village streets. As hail the size of golf balls fell from the sky.
At least 3 deaths have been linked to the historic downpour in California. The record-breaking rainfall led to a state of emergency in at least 8 counties. Nearly 400 mudslides have been reported in the Los Angeles area alone.
This year, the 8th and 9th of July saw landslides and flash floods lashing several parts of India. In Himachal Pradesh, torrential rains claimed at least 6 lives.
From North America to southeastern Australia, large parts of the planet are currently underwater. Unusually heavy rains are leading to deadly floods, hitting several countries all at once. While southern Africa experienced a prolonged dry spell, the heavy rains throughout March and April this year brought severe flooding to eastern African countries. The month of April was also the wettest month on record for Pakistan since 1961. In neighboring India, the Union territory of Jammu and Kashmir has witnessed incessant rainfall, resulting in flash floods and inundating several low-lying villages in Kupwara district. In fact, the rainfall has wiped out crops and reduced homes to ruins in the town. Unseasonal rainfall has lashed neighboring Afghanistan. The heavy downpour, followed by floods in Afghanistan, has claimed the lives of at least 14 people and also resulted in widespread destruction across the nation. Heavy rains also wreaked havoc in the South American country Brazil. In the first week of May, Texas woke up to flooded and damaged roads. Watch these images from 5th of May. It was a wet start to the month of May for much of New South Wales, and it is likely to continue for another week. Moving to Russia, Kurgan and Tyumen provinces were also evacuating thousands of people due to the deluge.
Tonight, chaos mounting in flood-ravaged Brazil, where as swollen rivers rise yet again, police patrol submerged streets, desperate to stop looters. And the country's Olympic hopefuls leave qualifying tournaments early, giving up on lifelong dreams to return home and help victims. Brazilian officials say close to 150 people have died and roughly 130 are still missing in the widespread floods, which come after a similar round of flooding hit the area late last year. Do you buy another house somewhere else?
An intensifying climate means more hurricanes, more floods, more wildfires. Unlike in generations past, there's more people, and there's more people who are in harm's way.
It's called climate migration, and for decades, experts like Professor Pablo Bose at the University of Vermont have been warning it will become a massive and massively destabilizing global phenomenon. Now, amid the worsening floods, tornadoes, and wildfires of our man-made climate crisis, these warnings are coming to fruition. fruition, with the UN predicting climate fears will force 216 million people across 6 continents to move within their countries by 2050. The White House warning in a 2021 report mass climate migration could induce political instability and pose risks to food and water security. Experts pleading with officials to focus not only on the impacts, but also to zero in on root causes of this man-made crisis that more and more is truly hitting home. President Biden putting out a statement over the weekend saying that his administration is in touch with their Brazilian partners to provide what they call necessary assistance to the Brazilian people. But it's important to remember that, today, okay, we're talking about Brazil, but you heard from that scientist in our piece, and the scientific community is in complete agreement on this, that climate change is leaving no corner of the world untouched, and climate migration will be the same. They believe it will be a completely global phenomenon unless, like you heard in that piece, Hallie, the root causes of climate change, and we talk about this a lot, are addressed as soon as possible, meaning pretty much now.
Deadly floods have wreaked havoc in Brazil, with nearly 75 deaths reported by the Civil Defense Agency in its latest report. More than 1 million people lacked access to potable water amid electricity and water supply cuts. Moreover, the storm also triggered Porto Alegre's International Airport to suspend all flights for an indefinite period.
Okay, we've seen wars, rumors of wars, world economic crisis, diseases, and disasters. These things are happening worldwide, as we can all see. And there are so many more cases which we can share. But for the sake of this video, we're just highlighting some key events.
In order to survive the system collapse, one of the key factors, and probably the most important one, is to be spiritually sound. Work on your relationship with the Most High, as He will be your guide throughout all things that will happen. No matter what comes your way, know that you will be fine.
Yes, it's very important to be spiritually sound and have faith in the Most High, because we cannot do this alone. We need to be asking for wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, health, strength, and perseverance. Sometimes us as people, we get caught up in the physical world, often forgetting the spiritual aspect of things. Faith is taking the first step, not knowing if there are stairs there. Faith is knowing that the Most High has your back through all situations.
In part 2 of this video, we'll be diving into the mental and physical mindset to have in order to survive the system collapse. We hope this video has blessed you. Thank you so much for watching. Peace, one love. He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress. My God, in Him will I trust. Surely He shall deliver thee from the snare of the fowler, and from the noisome pestilence. He shall cover thee with His feathers, and under His wings shalt thou trust. His truth shall be thy shield and buckler. Thou shalt not be afraid for the terror by night, nor for the arrow that flieth by day, nor for the pestilence that walketh in darkness, nor for the destruction that waiteth at noonday. 1,000 shall fall at thy side, and 10,000 at thy right hand, but it shall not come nigh thee. Selah.